Okay, everybody, we'll make a start. So I want to start by a very short non-fiction story. So a few years ago, I happened to be in a conference audience listening to the keynote speaker deliver her final emphatic closure to her speech. It was on a subject that I now really can't remember, but I do remember thinking that this was a speech on which she had undoubtedly spent months practicing and revising, pruning and fine-tuning. And at the exact moment of her closure of this speech, a cell phone started up in the audience, and it played the tune of "What Will We Do with a Drunken Sailor?" early in the morning. And there were red faces, there were embarrassed silences, and there was one forlorn-looking speaker. So please take a moment to kindly turn off your phones so they don't disturb our wonderful speakers today. So welcome, everyone. My name is Rob Ward, and I teach in the non-fiction writing program here in the English department at Brown. We're here to celebrate the winners of the annual non-fiction awards, which includes the Barbara Banks Brodsky Prize for Excellence in Real-World Writing, the David Rome Prize for the Best Lyric Essay, the Betsy Amanda Lehman 77 Memorial Award for Excellence in Journalism, and the Casey Shearer Memorial Award for Excellence in Creative Nonfiction. Aside from the winners, there are several people to thank, including the sponsors of the award, some of whom are in the audience this evening, specifically Ruth Goldway, so thank you very much. The 7 judges who read all the submissions with care and with learned eyes, and to every one of our students who found a faith in themselves as writers and shared their work with us. And last but not least, to Danielle Adams, Aaron Finn, Ellen Viola, and Sarah Madsen, who organised every single thing that has helped bring us all here today as a community. And this community, after COVID, always feels very vulnerable, and because of this, to me, very precious. And we meet at the close of another busy academic year, and in a world caught up in the same uncertainties and tensions and darkness. But may our gathering be what Auden calls an affirming flame. So I want to introduce the first award, the Barbara Banks Brodsky Prize for Excellence in Real-World Writing. And this year's winner is Eliza Berman for her beautiful crafted work, Inertia. It's a story of pain, of what Susan Sontag called the night side of life. But it's much more than that. It's about healing, it's about hope. It's what Eliza herself calls a symbol of love. Eliza Berman.
There are 29 bones in the hand and wrist, each bonded together through joints. 29 bones in the hand and wrist are coated with a layer of cartilage, protecting them. In my mom's hand, the cartilage has broken down, faded, degenerated, and the bones rub against each other. It is constant, disorderly friction. She feels this pain all the time. One winter, when I was 10, my parents brought my brother and me to a house near the mountains to enjoy the snow. When we arrived in the middle of the night, the heat in the house had not yet been turned on, and the house was freezing. My dad began to make a fire in a black steel fireplace as my mom gathered all the blankets in the house and one by one wrapped them around my brother and me, enveloping us. But our hands shook with coldness, and our breath hung cloudy and white in front of us, growing more opaque with every shallow breath. My mom pressed my 2 hands together, palm to palm, finger pad pressed against finger pad, and pushed her hands around mine. Her palms pushed firmly on the back of my smooth, soft hands. This was before her disease. This was when the pockets of her knuckles breathed. She slid her hands up and down my hands quickly and then slowly, dragging her palms from the base of my wrist to the tips of my fingers and back. The molecules on her hands gained energy through the friction that she generated, and she warmed my hands. I stopped shaking. I felt okay. Now the rubbing bones in her hand produce their own friction, and her hands are always hot, the second side effect. But stone cools them. The thermal inertia of the stone keeps her joints from further bulging. My mom has collected over 100 rocks this month, on beaches, in the driveways of her friends' houses, in the community garden. She bends slowly to pick them up as her hips and knees heat up, bones rubbing bones. A medical leave, followed immediately by a sabbatical, has given her the first extended break from a stressful 30-year profession as a physician and leader of a research program focused on addiction and chronic medical illness in the South Bronx of New York City. Her time off has lent itself well to a supreme rock collection. At any moment, stones fill her purse, her pockets, and cover the kitchen table. Grains of minerals compose stones. They are atoms bonded together in orderly structures. Stones are non-dynamic, unmoving, unable to burst or break. Next to the stones on her kitchen table sits paint markers and Sharpies of all different colors and thicknesses. My mom sits at the kitchen table, takes the black thin Sharpie, and engrains designs on the faces of her stones. She may work for 30 minutes, or maybe 2 hours, and then stand, extend her fingers to a locked knuckle position so tight that they shake, and walk away. She may come back later and pick up the same rock, choose a different colored paint marker, and continue folding design into the face of the rock. Or she may pick up a rock weeks later and layer it with a new color. Or she may never come back to that stone again. My mom has taken hundreds of rocks and intricately coated them with ink, adding the protective layer to their faces that is missing on her bones. Though an object in motion remains in motion, a body at rest remains at rest, and this scares us because slipping into rest is easy and slipping out is hard, and we can try so hard to stay moving, but Latin defined inertia on the lives of the still, not on the lives of the moving, and the word's root means want of art or skill, and unskillfulness and inactivity, and so our desire to make art can will us to break our inertia, but our bodies forbid it, and I yell to my mom to stop taking the kitchen knife from her hand because her hand is weak and shaking, and there is no need to be cutting onions right now, but she wants to keep cutting onions because she used to cut onions so finely, but I worry she will slice her other hand by accident, which grips the onion, and she knows this, so she puts the knife down and leaves the kitchen, and this hurts because this is loss of skill until a time we cannot know, and I took that away, and inertia keeps it, and that is pain, and the onion stays sitting on the cutting board, half of it sliced, half whole, at rest, until I pick up the knife and continue to make our dinner. The third side effect. Zentangle is a method of drawing based on the premise of promoting intense concentration, creativity, and mindfulness. A combination of meditation and art, Zentangle is made of a collection of carefully constructed patterns that fold over another to form an abstract design. The word stems from Zen, the Buddhist meditative philosophy of balancing the mind, and tangle, the word for the patterns, which consist of dots, lines, and curves. The word tangle comes from the large seaweeds, which become intertwisted and indecipherable as individual units of the fucus species. Zentangle is a deceptively simple practice to generate intricate designs, art, and doodles out of overlapping repeated dots and lines. Patterns bond together in orderly structures. The process intends to be relaxing, forcing the mind to reduce its bandwidth to pattern construction and repetition. Art therapists use Zentangle to promote motor skills, peace, motivation, focus, mood, pride, and self-concept. Thin lines emerge from the canvas, details reveal themselves as the pen conducts stroke after stroke. With hands that had to give up on gardening because squeezing a pair of clippers caused too much pain, tangles are produced in bursts of dozens. When sleep seems unreachable, the fourth side effect, and joints seem twice their normal size, my mom holds her Sharpie. Some days the tangles are more detailed than others. Other days the brush marks are wider, shakier, and waver as her hand shakes. When her disease spurs in her hands, my mom picks up a Sharpie and begins to tangle. Despite losing gardening, the 5th side effect, losing her daily Pilates practice, the 6th side effect, the ability to twist a can opener to open a can, the 7th side effect, walking without a cane, the 8th side effect, getting 8 consecutive hours of a good night's sleep, her hands have never refused her tangling. When the knuckles swell and the nerves tell her brain to send pain coursing through her body, she tangles and the pain gets number. She dulls her pain through the meditative practice of repetitive pattern production. My mom generates order and harmony through hands of friction and disorder. Once my mom begins a project, she will not stop. An object in motion stays in motion. Her medium complements her craft in orderly bonds, layer orderly bonds. She covers the stone in dots, lines, and curves. Once the dots and lines have been implanted on the face of the rock, she puts down the Sharpie. Her fingers resume their tremor, which was temporarily paused by the intense concentration of her mind on the rock, forcing even an involuntary shake of her fingers to subside. She picks up a pink marker next and adds another protective layer to the stone, cartilage protecting the rubbing of one bone on another. Products of moments where there was less pain, hundreds of rocks coated with design sit on the kitchen table. A few weeks ago, my mom gave me one of her rocks for the first time. It was a gift, a symbol of love, affection, of gratitude, of what she has overcome and continues to endure, an acknowledgement of the stress it creates in and around her life, and above all, a product of a painless moment in a painful, painful day, week, year, and years to come. It is a message in a language I cannot speak, a language of a suffering no one chooses to understand. It sits next to me as I write these words. I hold it between my fingers, and it cools my hands as the design pushes into my smooth pink skin, which has been warmed by the writing of this story. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Grace Toulousan, and I teach in the Nonfiction writing program, and I was also honored to serve as a judge for this year's awards. I'm pleased to introduce this year's winners of the David Rome Prize, awarded for the Best Lyric Essay, which is a poetic or experimental form that emphasizes artfulness. We'll hear from 2 readers. The first reader is second place winner Allison Chang for Water Lilies, which is a model and exemplifies what the lyric essay can hold. The content of the essay brings in Monet's paintings, color psychology, meditation, online culture, college courses, hospice, as well as different sorts of approaches to the material, bringing in research and first-person observation, and ultimately inviting the reader to consider thoughtfully and very beautifully seasons of our life. Our first place winner is Dylan Ines for Body. It's a stunning, intimate essay where the narrator explores the limitation of the form while also modeling possibilities of the lyric. There are visceral experiences of being a patient, questions about relationship to our body, contrasted with an experience with a grandparent, compassionate, and with compassion and clarity, the writer takes on big questions about life, how to live amidst the reality of not only time passing, but the inevitability of death. So for first reader is Allison Chang.
One, I remember stepping into a white oblong room when I'm 15. Never before have I seen a room like this, wrapped in panoramic painting. The Nymphaeas, Water Lilies, Claude Monet. A series of 8 compositions are mounted on the curved walls. 2, Monet designed the space himself. 2 elliptical rooms, creating the illusion of an endless whole, of a wave without horizon and without shore. I find a certain tranquility in infiniteness. 3. In infinite space, I can breathe deeply. Tree trunks grow out of the reflections in the pond, a continuous extension into reality, unclear where one ends and the other begins. The sky is in the water becomes the sky. Wispy in the wind, the clouds meander along the edge of the shore, tickled by the caress of the weeping willows. The air is cool, tasting of the sweet grass beginning to grow in thickets by the water's edge. As twilight seeps into the sky, the water lilies begin to curl into themselves, as a hand closes into a fist. Pink and white buds fold inwards as the shadows of the water deepen and blur. 4. As I write on serenity, the face of the meditation man floats in my mind. 5. Our van pulls to a halt in a narrow alley somewhere in Bangkok. Along with the rest of the tired high school teens, I reluctantly step out from the crisp air-conditioned van into the humid heaviness of July. My t-shirt is limp with sweat and sticks to the small of my back as I attempt to straighten it out. We collect outside the entrance of a nondescript white stucco building, whereupon an older man with closely cut salt and pepper hair arrives to greet us. The meditation man, as our community service trip leaders dubbed him, wears a solemn expression and simple white linens. His feet are bare on the red tile. 6. Hartanto Gunawan is the real name of the meditation man. He sits on the ground at the front of the room, lotus pose. In a smooth, quiet voice, he tells us his story. Previously a CEO at a multi-industry holding company in Indonesia, he found his life filled with stress and impatience during the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Disillusioned, he quit his job and moved to Thailand to become a Buddhist monk. 7. In Buddhism, the water lily is a symbol of resurrection, a flower which closes at night and blooms in the morning, opens and closes, a cycle on, endless. 8. Hartanto teaches us that there is serenity in cyclic breath. One form of meditation is to focus solely on the physicality of the motion. Inhale, stomach expands, lungs fill. Exhale, stomach shrinks, lungs compress. Think about the movement of the air, the push and the pull. Let the breath flow. Let your mind be empty. 9. In calmness, it seems, there's infiniteness. There's also emptiness. I must allow all thoughts to drain out of me. Release the tension within my body. Let go of the anger, the excitement, the sadness. What then remains? 10. In many of Monet's paintings, all you can see is water. In the water, all you can see is the sky. In the sky, all you can see is color. Shapes melt into strokes, a pastel fog. All that is left in the blur of color are the small distinct dots of water lilies. 11. In color psychology theory, certain colors can be associated with a person's emotions. Anger is red. Happiness is yellow. Serenity, then, must be a blend of the water lilies. Soft lavender, sky blue, pale pink, deep green. This is the color of the breath as it flows into the lungs and seeps out through the nose.
One, when I sit across a table with someone for too long, I often worry that they may fall apart, that they may decompose into some fundamental, organic unit of life and seep into the earth. Of course, this has never happened. 2, traditions of dualisms, of mind and body, of phallic and yonic, of self and non-self, used to paint my mental picture of the body. However, I think mental shortcuts like these are rarely an accurate representation of the world. Aren't most things spectral? Perhaps binaries ease the compulsive part of me that seeks wholeness or completion, but binaries rely on a singular contrast, an inevitable negation of points of overlap and peace and unity. To have a body is to exist in the fuzzy warmth of a perpetual in-between. 3, Several months ago, I had a spinal tap procedure done in the emergency room. A young resident doctor told me about the procedure with a surprising confidence and calm demeanor. Essentially, we'll poke a needle into your lower back and draw out your cerebrospinal fluid. Then we'll run tests to see if there are any markers of infection in it. The procedure felt invasive. The needle punctured my lower back, and though I couldn't feel it, the idea of the foreign body puncturing my skin felt violating. Part of me was now floating around in a vial, out in the physical world. My skin, usually reliable barrier wherein I keep the rest of my contents, had been violently punctured, and part of me had been forced out. I felt as though the slightest force would rupture my skin and deflate me. I could feel my skin dissolving and my body melting into the itchy fitted sheet that covered the gurney where I lay. For weeks after the procedure, I couldn't stand for longer than a few minutes due to an excruciating pain that pierced the back of my head, reminding me with a violent force of the part of my body I'd left behind. 4. The body seems ever-changing. It is as transient as the passing of time, as the infinite number of extreme present moments that the second hand of a clock leaves between each tick. My body exists under the inescapable force of time and changes constantly in small ways, leaving my sense of self confused. I am unable to find a foothold in the spectral amorphous body that exists on the perpetual event horizon central to the universal force of time that leaches through my pores. 5. His hands acted as the brush with which he painted the expansive, blank canvas of his non-self, deformities in the form of calluses that developed from years of frequent pressure and strain serve as an unmistakable record of his lifelong factory work and manual labor. A record of the context that his physical body was placed in, and a record of the way his body danced with his surroundings and shaped his local world. Most apparent when using his index finger to point somewhere on a map, an action he does quite often when exploring his atlas in great detail. The sound of his finger on the decaying paper creates a hard, staccato tone, as if pointing to this location is so resolute and assured that his finger exclaims its findings. 6. I hesitantly walk into the post-anesthesia care unit, my shoes squeaking with each step on the pale green linoleum floor. I pass an endless line of beds pushed against the wall, each inhabited by a different sleeping face. Most patients have a nasal cannula stripped around their face, providing a constant flow of oxygen and conferring an eerie similarity to all of the gowned patients. I walk past a pale woman in a deep sleep. She has bruises on the back of her left hand, and she snores softly. I walk past, but quickly turn around, realizing that I've misidentified my grandmother as an elderly woman whose life hangs onto a feeble tube that sits on her upper lip. I pull up a chair and sit down, just close enough that I can reach out and rest my hand on top of her bruised one. Her eyes open, but she does not wake up. "Do I have to die?" she whispers, almost inaudibly. "You'll be okay. You fell yesterday and broke your hip. They gave you total hip replacement and you're recovering now." She responds with a dull silence. Several minutes later, she rolls her head to the side, radiating a blank stare that pulses through me and out of the back of my head. 7. My grandmother had a portion of her hip removed and a titanium prosthetic placed in its stead. Of course, she would agree that she still maintains the same body that she did before surgery, but where's the point at which her body would no longer be hers? My grandmother lost a portion of her memory and cognitive abilities due to the anesthesia. Perhaps compounded by the early stages of a neurodegenerative disease, she seemed to be a different person after her fall. For weeks, she would stay up late watching television, fearful of getting into bed with her husband of 60 years because she did not recognize him. "I need to run away from here. I don't belong here." Not only had her body been fundamentally altered, but much of her memories and sense of self had been erased. I would stay up with her at night, reassuring her that she belonged here, that she was loved, that we would take care of her. She would cry softly, and I put my hand on her shoulder, unsure if she knew that the gesture came from her grandson or a stranger. I would repeat comforting mantras to her, desperately trying to convince her of her lost identity and of the woman she once was. "He is your husband. We are here to help you. You belong here. You belong here. You belong here." X. I often live outside of myself. I will assume a third person's perspective, or attempt to live through the people in my local realm. I will often look through someone else's lens and neglect my own values, desires, and motivations. Is this empathy? Or is this anxiety? Ego? Whatever it may be, it sketches a leaky, incomplete puzzle piece concept of the human entity. If we were discrete structures, I do not think it would be possible to live outside of oneself. Because isn't the human condition defined by our ability to live beyond our own bodies? Aren't empathy and love and giving and sacrifice and regret those distinct qualities that drive our human experience? To be human is to step out, even if just for a moment, and breathe in that sweet substance that has touched the soul of our collective humanity.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nell Lake. I teach journalism in the nonfiction program. And the Betsy Amanda Lehman Memorial Award for Excellence in Journalism was established in honor of Betsy Amanda Lehman, Brown class of 1977. Lehman was a healthcare journalist and columnist for the Boston Globe, a champion for patients and an advocate for compassionate care. Lehman died in 1994 at the age of 39 of complications from breast cancer treatment. In the words of its founders, the Lehman Prize is awarded to a senior student at Brown studying journalism or practicing as a journalist for a campus or professional publication who has demonstrated outstanding accomplishments and an intellectual ability. I'm so pleased to introduce Gaya Gupta and Ben Glickman. Gaya Gupta, our first place award winner, and Ben Glickman, our second place winner. Gaya has spent much of her time, and I just want to say that in the case of journalism, I think it's worth talking about the work out in the real world that these students do. So I want to talk about how Gaya has spent much of her time at Brown, honing her journalism skills and pursuing opportunities that contribute to journalism in impactful ways. In 2022, as a member of the Brown Daily Herald's editorial board, Gaya founded the Herald's digital news desk, where she led students in innovative digital storytelling and data journalism. During the summer of 2021, Gaya worked as a reporter at the Virginian Pilot, and in the summer of 2022 as a reporter at the Washington Post. In both positions, Gaya brought her knowledge of data science to important stories about public transportation and private transportation, I think in the story that you're going to read, and about racial health disparities. The award committee was impressed by the depth of Gaya's reporting, her clear writing, and the importance of her stories to understanding critical social issues. Ben Glickman was the editor-in-chief of the Brown Daily Herald in 2022 and guided the publication and its 250 reporters in daily news production. During the summer of 2021, Ben worked as a reporter for the Provincetown Independent, and in the summer of 2022 for the Financial Times. And the committee found the range of Ben's writing to be impressive, from narrative to daily reporting. Both students are heading into wonderful opportunities after graduating. Gaya has been awarded a fellowship with the New York Times, and Ben an internship for a major national newspaper, news of which is not public yet, so I'm not able to share the name of that publication. But congratulations to you both, and Ben will read first.
Hi, everyone. I'll be reading a piece I published in the Financial Times entitled "Americans Stay Away from Great Outdoors Amid Rising Petrol Costs." Last summer, Arches National Park in Utah often seemed like the mall on Black Friday to park ranger Karen Garthwaite. Visitors eager to soak in the park's looming red rock formations were forced to drive around looking for parking. Now, there are parking spaces to spare. Whatever is causing the slowdown, it is not just Arches, Garthwaite said. Following a summer in which national parks boomed as pandemic vacation destinations, those places that broke records for visits are experiencing a downturn this year. The drop reflects the increasingly complicated trade-offs U.S. travelers face as petrol prices rise to record levels while international destinations open up again with the easing of the coronavirus crisis. Of the 19 national parks that set visitation records in 2021, 14 have experienced declines year on year as of May, according to the most recent data from the National Park Service. The number of visitors at all parks is down more than 5% year on year, but still remains just above 2019 levels. The spike in visits last summer led to a surge in prices for remote short-term rentals and spelt trouble for parks like Arches, where there was overcrowding, Garthwaite said. Arches and others implemented reservation systems, which may have kept tourist numbers down this year. But Garthwaite noted that there have also been declines in neighboring parks to Arches that do not have similar systems. Despite several parks setting records, 2021 visitation across the national park system, which also includes landmarks other than historic sites, was still below pre-pandemic totals, said Naman Horn, a spokesperson for the park in the American West. But economic factors, COVID-19, and weather may be affecting the numbers this year. The parks, many of which are perched in remote alcoves of America, are popular destinations for road trips. In 2021, more than half of visitors to national parks traveled over 200 miles, according to data from the U.S. Travel Association, a trade group. Consumers have favored travel by car in the past 2 years owing to concerns about COVID, said Lindsay Rushke, travel and hospitality analyst for Morning Consult. But consumers shifting their focus to rising prices may be less likely to drive, she added. Average petrol prices rose above $5 per gallon in June, according to data from U.S. automotive company AAA. Families typically take more road trips in the summer in the United States, said Jeffrey Heel, a professor at Columbia Business School. But, quote, you'd expect gas prices to dampen that to some degree. Consumers are increasingly willing to use transportation other than cars as well, with 52% of adults saying they are comfortable flying, compared to 42% a year ago, according to Morning Consult data. That trend coincides with the lowest level of concern about COVID since the research firm began tracking in January 2020. That also coincides, though, with delays, flight cancellations, and staffing shortages at airlines, Heel noted. Those issues, along with rising airline ticket prices, may deter some travelers. International travel has increased drastically compared to last year, with total international air passengers up 156.8% year on year, according to data from the International Trade Administration. We've got huge pent-up demand, and so folks are taking those trips that they've been wanting to take and going multiple different places, not just to outdoor locations, said Tori Emerson Barnes, Executive Vice President for Public Affairs and Policy at U.S. Travel Association. The increase in international travel both in and out of the U.S. will have a mixed impact on national parks, Barnes said. While domestic travelers are turning to other destinations, international tourists may be returning. During a recent walk through Arches, Ranger Garthwaite overheard at least 7 different languages. We've seen a slight drop in visitation, but there are still plenty of people enjoying the park every day, she said. I don't see that changing. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm going to be reading a piece I wrote for the Virginian Pilot called Deaths of Despair, how during the pandemic the rate of Black people in Hampton Roads dying from opioid overdoses more than doubled. As the coronavirus pandemic fueled the opioid addiction crisis in America last year, no demographic group was hit harder than the Black community. The rate at which Black people in Hampton Roads died from opioid overdoses jumped from 11.8 to 27.9 per 100,000 of the population between 2019 and 2020, according to preliminary Virginia Department of Health data. That's a 140% increase, higher than any other racial or ethnic group in the area. Statewide, in 2020, the rate of Black people dying from opioid overdoses surpassed that of white people for the first time since the data started being recorded in 2007. At 29.9 per 100,000, the rate of fatal opioid overdoses in Black populations is about 33% higher than the total statewide rate. Black men are experiencing the highest fatal opioid overdose rate ever recorded at 45.5 per 100,000 and are dying at 1.4 times the rate of white men. Reverend Joshua N. King, senior pastor of Hampton's historically black Zion Baptist Church, said he has lost 2 people in his congregation to drug overdoses, but he had no idea that opioid substance abuse was hitting his community so hard. He calls it a quiet crisis. The pandemic effect. Leaders in opioid recovery programs across Hampton Roads community service boards agree that the isolation and social stresses of the pandemic drove up drug use overall. But the Black community faced particular hardships and inequities during the pandemic, which many believe might have further exacerbated drug use. Jan Brown, the 57-year-old director and founder of addiction recovery center Spirit Works Foundation in Williamsburg, calls the 510 Black people who fatally overdosed in the state deaths of despair, which she defines as deaths caused by the social stresses, polarization, and systematic health barriers that people of color face, particularly during the pandemic. Socioeconomics, education level, being a Black citizen, those are all things that are barriers in this day and age, Brown said. So that's what we consider these fatal overdoses. They are deaths of despair. Black people faced a record number of job losses during the pandemic, according to a report for the Economic Policy Institute, a nonprofit American think tank. Nationally, more than 1 in 6 Black workers lost their jobs between February and April 2020. Losing your job can be detrimental to substance abuse recovery, says Sandrine Lamb, director of the Showers of Blessings Substance Abuse Support Group in Norfolk. Without structure and accountability, many of those who had overcome substance abuse slipped back into old habits and started using again when faced with newfound isolation or unemployment, she said. Holding each other responsible when we're with one another can make a difference, but that was taken away during COVID, Lamb said. People lost their jobs, and I think it made our population more depressed, and drugs were the only way that they could cope. Brown and Lamb agree that the economic and health inequities faced by the Black community caused stress and loneliness during the pandemic. King agrees. If there's one thing the pandemic has caused for his congregation, it's hopelessness, he said. I'm overloaded as a pastor with counseling. The counseling centers are overloaded, said King. And so when you can't get the help that you need, you turn to alternative sources. As drug use rose in the Black community, fewer people were going in for treatment, Lamb found. The Showers of Blessing program is hosted by Bethany Baptist Church, one of the largest Black churches in Hampton Roads. In a normal year, about 6 new members would join the program each month, with an average of 15 people attending each of the program's 3 weekly meetings. But when recovery sessions were moved onto Zoom once a week, the numbers dropped. Only 3 people continued attending during the pandemic, Lamb said. The Hampton Newport News Community Services Board also saw a 30% decrease in people requesting treatment. Lillian Chamberlain, who manages the board's opioid treatment program, found fewer low-income residents and people of color were coming in for treatment, as did Tony Crisp, director of the board's Addiction and Recovery Treatment Services. I'm assuming for our residential services, they assumed we were closed, Chamberlain said. We also saw people just not coming in for treatment. Brown also pointed out the mistrust that many minorities face when approaching the healthcare law or law enforcement system. Even though Virginia's Good Samaritan law provides protection against an individual's arrest during an opioid when calling 911, many still don't trust that they get the help that they need. They're afraid that they're going to have their children taken away, or they're going to be turned in, or they're going to be arrested, explained Brown. So again, that whole criminalization instead of the healthcare is what many are facing. Across opioid recovery organizations from Williamsburg to Southampton Roads, there's one trend everyone agreed was a key factor in the increased number of fatal overdoses: fentanyl, a synthetic and highly lethal opioid. We have seen a lot of mixing with medications and opioids with fentanyl, said Woodward. And fentanyl is a very, very toxic and deadly substance. Fentanyl accounted for 1,658, or more than 86% of the 1,915 total opioid overdoses statewide last year. A lot of the time, people don't realize the drugs that they're using contain fentanyl, said Lamb. So part of the reason she believes these fatalities have increased so much in the past year is that users simply don't know how strong their drugs are and end up accidentally overdosing. Fentanyl is affecting all corners of the drug supply, but especially in Black communities, continued Brown. Heroin and crack don't cost very much, and those are the drugs that, sadly, were introduced to Black communities and the inner city years ago, said Brown. And so those are the ones that are accessible and preferred. So since they are tainted, it makes for pretty fatal outcomes. Mitigating mistrust. King is frustrated with the differences in how society views opioid addiction between Black and white people. Whereas crack use in Black urban populations in the 1980s and 90s was classified as a war on drugs, the more recent prescription opioid epidemic affecting white communities has been deemed a health crisis, he said. Now that opioid misuse is affecting Black people in Hampton Roads, he needs local resources to shift their attention to combating substance abuse and overdosing in his community. It's always been highlighted in the white community, he says. The opioid addiction started in an affluent community is now being treated there, but it's not being treated in our community. We need to balance the scales of how we look at opioid addiction. As one of the few people of color who work at Spirit Works, Brown often finds herself being tasked with reaching out to the Black community. She wants more counselors to reach out to the Black community about opioid recovery with the same urgency they reached out during presidential elections or to get residents vaccinated. And in order to increase trust between Black communities and recovery healthcare resources, she believes outreach efforts should start in the places Black people are already trust the most, like barbershops and churches. Dennis Southers, a prevention educator, and Shelby Giles, a clinical services administrator, worked with Virginia Beach Human Services to set up a table at Enoch Baptist Church, which is predominantly Black, to help build up connections and trust with the community. The education we provide is an effort to help try to help mitigate some of the mistrust that has developed over generations of mistreatment of minorities, of people of different cultures in our community, Giles said. Meeting people where they are in the community is essential. You can't expect them to come to your office door. Chris points out that while many people of color who come into treatment are faced with therapists who don't look like them, many of the Hampton Newport News Board support peers, therapists, and leadership are people of color who might be able to better relate and support minorities who come into treatment. Look at us, he said, gesturing to himself, Chamberlain, and the board's director of communications, Sherry Hunt. People of color. Our therapists, physicians, doctors, nurses are all people of color. We understand them. Chamberlain also added that anyone, whether they have health insurance or not, is welcome to their treatment services. Their ability to pay, she said, is not a factor. Brown acknowledged that recovery resources, such as medicated treatment programs and counseling services that would help Black and brown communities are there. It's just a matter of implementing them and making sure they reach people in need. King agrees. As a leader in the Black community, he said he needs to work with other trusted Black figures and local treatment programs to talk more about this issue and set up ways to get his community the help they need. I think because we're in such a desperate place that people are more willing to work with one another, and so it keeps me going, Brown said. I know that it can be different. I guess I'm stubborn. I know it personally. I know it professionally. I know scientifically that it doesn't have to be this way, and so I'm not going to give up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Buse, and as the interim chair of English this year, it's my great pleasure to introduce the Casey Shearer Memorial Awards for Excellence in Creative Nonfiction. Casey Shearer, class of 2000, was a vibrant, talented, and much-loved member of the Brown community. An economics concentrator, he also studied Spanish, political science, and literature, and he was one of a group that revived Brown student radio. He was well known on campus as the station's play-by-play sports announcer, and he also wrote a weekly sports column on the case for the College Hill Independent, known informally as the Indie. One of his favorite teachers was our colleague, distinguished senior lecturer emerita Beth Taylor, who retired from Brown 2 years ago. Beth said about Casey, he wrote with an ease and confidence. That ease emerged from and in turn reflected the warmth of his personality and his enormous potential for a successful career in sports journalism. Casey was born and raised in Santa Monica, California, where his mother, Ruth Goldway, retired chair of the U.S. Postal Regulatory Commission, had been mayor, and we're really delighted that Ruth and other friends and family members are with us today. Casey graduated from high school in Finland, where his father, Occidental College professor Derek Shearer, served as US ambassador. A top student at Brown, Shearer was a member of the Economics Honor Society, and he received his magna cum laude pin the Friday before he was to graduate. Later that day, during a basketball game at the athletic center, Casey Shearer's heart stopped and he collapsed. The cause was a viral heart infection. He had never had any previous symptoms, and he died 4 days later on May 23rd, just 2 months before his 22nd birthday. I'm going to introduce the two award winners one at a time. The second place winner first, Caelyn Pender, and she'll read, and then I'll introduce the first place winner. So the work that has earned second place for the Casey Shearer Memorial Award for Excellence in Creative Nonfiction in 2023 is Caelyn Pender's Mary Elizabeth Spock's, which pieces together a story of her great-grandmother's life. It's a fascinatingly incomplete biography composed of fragments, old photographs, unanswered questions and discoveries, and many, many ellipses, a quality of her essay that I particularly enjoyed. Well done, Caelyn.
Hello. I'm reading just part of this piece, but Mary Elizabeth Spock's. Chapter 1, Photographs. I've constructed a life out of photographs and census records. I've spent hours staring at images of people I've never met, imagining what they may be thinking in the moment the flash triggers and the shutter clicks. I've looked into their eyes, seeking some spark of connection to tell me what I am missing. It never comes, of course. Though I strain to hear their stories, hope to see their lips move and a voice emerge, the figures in the photos don't speak back. I've rifled through records upon records, zooming in to stare at handwriting and decipher job titles. I've tracked addresses from year to year, vigorously searched missing census records. How does a name change in 10 years? How does someone fall off the record books? The yellowed papers refused to tell me. I've rifled through the box of books and photos at my grandparents' house so many times that I eventually convinced them to let me bring it home with me. I told them I would scan the photographs, digitize them to ensure that they would survive every future move and California fire season. I met my great-grandmother only briefly in encounters I will never remember. I've been told she used to hold me, 80-something years old and in a wheelchair, and not want to let me go. Can I keep her? She once asked my mom. There's a photograph of us together somewhere, she looking at infant me and me staring right back. I'm not sure if I've seen it or if it's only been described to me. I've heard a few anecdotes here and there, but only those that scratch the surface, a vignette or a memory. Our dog was named Clancy, and he would beat up the other neighborhood dogs, my grandpa has told me. She used to make Christmas cookies every year. It's the same recipe we use during the holidays, my mom has said. I think she once told me her last name was C, my aunt has tried to recall. I never had the chance to get to know my great-grandmother when she was alive. She passed away when I was not yet a year old. So I've come to know her through her photographs, her newspaper clippings, her college sorority letters, and football programs. I've been drawn back to the blue and white box time and time again, where I can explore years of her life, neatly categorized into yellow manila folders and crumpled white envelopes. Some are labeled with years and dates, others have no indication of what's inside. Her life, though well documented from the time she was a teenager when she was able to do the documenting herself, was largely a mystery that, since I was 8 years old, I have been trying to solve. I began compiling my records in a pink binder that is still tucked in the closet of my childhood bedroom. I printed off documents I could have easily saved online. I wrote notes in the margins and copied dates into my notebook. I wrote out possible spellings, possible places. The notebook filled, quickly, over years, with unanswered questions. Questions that were, until less than a year ago, unanswerable. Chapter 2, an incomplete biography of Mary Elizabeth. Mary Elizabeth was born in 1916, or 1917, or 1918. She was born in Chicago, Illinois. That's what she wrote in every census, every personal record. She has no birth records, or at least ones I can find. She never knew the month or day of her birth, so she celebrated on Christmas. My mom once told me that she liked the attention of her birthday being on a holiday. I sometimes wonder what hole that was filling. In one photo, her birthday cake has a question mark candle where the age should be. Mary did not know the names of her parents, and neither do the records. Her father was Chris, she thought, or maybe Christopher. His last name was Coro. Her mother was a blank space. She left when Mary was a toddler, leaving her with her father. I have a photograph of Mary and her mother, the only one I know exists. The woman in the photograph, holding a toddler in a white dress, has been nameless for most of my life. Mary was given to a family friend. That's the word that's always been used. There are no adoption papers nor records of any sort. Her adoptive mother was named Marie Purchase, a severe-looking woman with grown children of her own and a husband long dead. I'm not sure how Mary's father knew her. She may have been officially adopted after turning 18, but Michigan has no record of it. They once searched and wrote me a letter back, another dead end. By 1935, when Mary was a teenager, she was living in Detroit, Michigan. Chapter 5, an incomplete biography of Mary Elizabeth, revised and updated. Mary Elizabeth was born in 1916 or 1917 or 1918. She was born in Chicago, Illinois. That's all the same. She was born to father Christos Corriginus, or Corrigan, or Corrigines, and mother Tertia Rafak. The names are spelled differently in various records, reflecting various attempts to Americanize them, or remnants of the census record workers who did not know how to string together the sounds of other languages. Christos was born in 1888 in Kavasila, Greece, a small village that today has less than 1,300 inhabitants. He arrived in the United States in 1909 or 1910. Tertia was born in 1898 in Slovakia or Hungary. She was an illegitimate child, likely of a Slovakian woman and a Jewish man. Her mom married shortly after she was born and had several more children. I will likely never know who Tertia's Jewish father was. The union would have been forbidden. Tertia and Christos married in 1916. After 1920, both of their lives are murky. I've yet to explore them in depth, but I know I will at some point. Because I want to learn why Tertia left. What drove her to it? Where did she go? Did she ever remarry, have more children? And for Christos, I know he did have more children, but where are they? Is my family bigger than I previously thought? I have been told that Mary Elizabeth once took the bus to visit her father and his new life. He had a new wife and more children. She stayed for a few days before returning to Marie. What must that have been like, to return to a place that by definition should have been home, but in reality is nowhere to be found? But I'm sure Mary Elizabeth was used to it. She lived without a birth certificate, without a name. She lived as a child picked back up after being forgotten. She went right from college to marriage. She lovingly raised 2 children, even when her husband left her. She baked, tucked her recipes into boxes that we now keep at our house. She went on trips, documented in the many photographs she kept. She loved, I know that for sure. Among her own life relics, she collected those of her family, her sons, her friends. She kept Christmas cards and craft projects, photos of her beloved Siamese cats. My sister inherited her baking abilities, and my cousin inherited her facial features. I inherited her tendency to collect. I keep everything from plane tickets and brochures to the cards I've been given and Polaroid photos I take of my friends, tucked away into folders and boxes and drawers. I document my own life the same way she documented hers, though I have far less of a need to. I've never stopped to wonder why I do it. In Mary Elizabeth's obituary, my name is listed, survived by great-granddaughter Caelyn Elizabeth Pender. I also inherited part of her name, Elizabeth. It's fitting, I think, because I sit here and wonder if in 100 years, some great-granddaughter of mine will rifle through my collections and ask these same questions about me. Thank you.
Thank you, Caelyn. The winner of this year's Casey Shearer Award is Grandfather by Jackie Zhu. Jackie's piece is not, as its title might suggest, a touching or simply affectionate portrait of an elder relative, but rather a depiction filled with tension, with its objects displays of anger, with his intolerance, and ultimately with his illness. Congratulations on your award and a wonderful piece of writing, Jackie. Not sure where she is, though. Oh.
So
this will also just be an excerpt of my essay. Grandfather never admitted that he didn't like girls, but he admitted the sense of disliking my gender. He disdained any dolls I owned and tried to replace them with models of planes and tanks. He was furious when he heard that I began taking ballet lessons, and even threw away the first tutu I got. Whenever he had a visitor, he would not refer to me as his granddaughter, but the girl. An old man with so high self-esteem unmatched by his height, he had created a whole world where I, as a girl, was not allowed to intrude. And for all these reasons, Mother found grandfather's presence in the family extremely unpleasant. If this man has learned at least the basics of genetics, he would realize how ridiculous this is. Hard to believe he's gone to university, no? Mother joked on the way Father drove us to my elementary school. Well, you may not know what university is yet. All you need to know is that you should just be yourself. I always chuckled at her words. Mother was a woman of the city, after all, a resolute decision-maker and a rational problem handler of a family. She possesses the great wisdom, as Father called it, which would make everything turn out just as fine as one would expect. Grandfather is staying here because he is your father's father. If he makes you unhappy, just ignore him. You'll never have to listen to someone you feel uncomfortable talking to. Don't bother with grandfather. He's just a bit lonely living in a new environment, Father added. I was not sure whether he was actually lonely, though, for he could entertain himself all day by just mumbling in his own world. When I was 9, my sister was born. Her birth made grandfather struggle even more with our family dynamics. After realizing that he could not make me a boy in any possible way, he began fiercely defending his masculine status by telling me, since Mother didn't really buy into him, with strongly accented Mandarin I could hardly make out. You know, you girls don't need to work hard at school. Your aunt, she graduated high school and married a good husband. Now they have a big house in Ningbo and a twin of chubby sons. That's what you girls are destined to do. Or, your grandmother left me because she thought I was being too assertive. No. She insisted on being a dentist, but how can a woman dentist be compared with those of men doctors? Thus, she was poor, still poor when she passed away, but she had the honor of being buried in Utown. It was often when he was giving his mighty speech, Mother would interrupt the conversation and take me away. Thanks to her, I never took his words seriously. One day, grandfather yelled behind us, one day you'll learn that what I said was the right way. Mother only grinned to his words. She never once gave in to grandfather's challenge or bowed to his presence. Not until his hospitalization. The second time I saw grandfather seeking to escape was on Chinese New Year's Eve of 2015. Grandfather's surgery was not very successful. Cancer cells spread across his intestines and put the old man down into the patient bed, surviving every day on a liquid diet and tubes all over his body. After we were told that there would only be less than 3 months we could spend with grandfather, my parents decided to move to Ningbo and spend the rest of the days with him. However, spending grandfather's last days with him was not as simple as we imagined. Lying in the rural-urban transition of Ningbo, Utown was such a different place from Shenzhen. Among the banana farms and rice paddies, most buildings were rather ill-maintained, and wall paints were crumbling down. Beneath the dim yellow sky, there were temples where incense burned through endless days and nights, and where monks, with Buddha knows what beliefs, chanted scriptures and begged for alms from door to door. The air was different, too. It smelled like grandfather's breath. Because Ningbo was grandfather's hometown, most of his relatives were there. My family had barely met with any of them, yet they all deemed us to be acquaintances, acquainted well enough to be ordered about. The aunt who grandfather always bragged about oversaw grandfather's house, so even after grandfather took back the keys, she insisted on checking on us every often with her husband, bombarding mother with all sorts of do's and don'ts about the house, as if this house belonged to them. They spoke grandfather's tongue. You are the wife, so you should cook, aunt and uncle said. You're now given the opportunity to learn about taking care of the family, so cherish it. Mother first turned a deaf ear to their instructions and requested father multiple times to let his relatives shut their mouths. But father was already on a whole nother planet, engulfed by sorrow by his only parent's imminent departure from the living world. It was only a month after grandfather was hospitalized, yet he already withered into a pile of bones. Father spent his days by grandfather's bedside, wiping his dehydrated body tirelessly and feeding him conjugate with such patience as if he was tending a newborn. They were in their little cubicle space, and Mother's voice was, for the first time, completely unheard. Back in Grandfather's place, Aunt caught us to join a family dinner she had arranged to celebrate the end of the lunar year. In their old yet spacious brick house, dozens of unfamiliar faces gathered in the dining room as windows turned foggy from heat. People pushed back and forth, children screamed and yelled, dogs howled and barked. The fathers and uncles and husbands drank and smoked and sweated on the men's table, gobbling down meat and fish as cigarette smoke filled the air and blurred their figures. Aunt moved swiftly through the veils of smoke, sending freshly cooked dishes to the men and retrieving the leftover with a large pot, which was to be dumped later into their family farm compost. Mother was seated among the other mothers at the women's table, which was located closer to the kitchen. Among their chatters regarding children and housework, we felt completely out of place. Then, as if they had planned it all, everyone on the table suddenly turned their attention to Mother. "You are the daughter-in-law of my uncle, right? Why aren't you tending your father-in-law at the hospital? We heard that you have to ask for a leave from your office. Is that going to affect your employment status? What do you know? A long-term leave means demotion. How does it feel to take care of the family? Better than working in the office, no?" The relatives' every word to Mother was like plucking feathers away from the chicken, and soon the chicken was ready to be butchered. Mother began to crumble down like the wall of paint. Her eyes became dull and exhausted, so much duller than the times when she worked late into the night or when she traveled for business. There was something that the air was making of her, I thought, because her eyes now looked like the yellow Ningbo sky. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. That's such a wonderful reading from our award winners, and I think everybody in non-fiction writing is so impressed every day of the talent of the students in our classes and their commitment to their own writing and their devotion to the subject of creative non-fiction writing and journalism, of course. I also want to thank everybody again who submitted their work to this competition, and again to the sponsors of the award, and to everyone here this evening that made it a community for us. I'd like to close, if I may, on a thought that reflects the quality of the creative work that we've been hearing and the quality of the creative work that has been submitted for these awards. But it's also an insight that may inspire the work yet to come for next year and the year beyond. And it's this. It comes to this, says Marianne Moore, the poet. Of whatever sort it is, it must be lit with piercing glances into the life of things. So on behalf of the English department and the non-fiction writing programme, I want to thank you again and thank everybody here, and I hope you have a really lovely weekend and a really glorious summertime. So thanks very much.